My name is Dan Kornhauser, and I'm here with my co-host, our resident draft expert, Mr. Sam Teets. Sam, happy March.
Happy March, Dan. It's been a minute. We haven't talked since, I think, almost December at this point. It's been a little while, but we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of catching up to do.
Yes, I think the last one was the national championship, if I remember correctly. But a lot has happened since then. We're going to jump right into it. We got a lot to cover. I do want to start with the 2023 Senior Bowl. Happened down in Mobile, Alabama. You were there. I want to hear everything. I want to know was it easy getting there? Who did you talk to? Let's hear it.
So let's start from the beginning. It was I almost missed my flight out of Jersey to go down there to begin with. So that was an experience. I haven't flown in a long time, man. So I don't think I've ever flown by myself up to this point. But I was flying out. I almost missed my flight. TSA checkpoints in Trenton, New Jersey were not very, or Newark, New Jersey were not very kind. There was only one open at whatever time in the morning it was. But I had to take a layover from Houston to go to Mobile. There's no direct flights to Mobile because it's a really small airport.
Okay.
The flight to Houston, I was sitting next to a guy. They have Houston airport is really nice. They have some charging stations for your laptops and stuff like that. So I was sitting down. The guy next to me has an NFL Network logo on his computer. And I'm like, all right, maybe it's just a fan. Maybe it's a coincidence. And they call our plane. So I start leaving, and I'm walking behind this guy, and the ears are sticking out. I'm thinking to myself, this guy looks kind of familiar. It's Andrew Siciliano is in front of me, boarding the plane. And then I go to get in line. I just want to double check I'm in the right spot to board the plane. I turn around and talk to the guy behind me and I ask him, hey, am I in the right spot? He goes, yeah, it's Mike Renner from PFF right behind me. So it's just all these media dudes, all these scouts. There was Tom Allen, the college football coach, was on that flight. There's a bunch of guys from different college teams. So it was everyone from big time networks to NFL teams to college teams were going down. We were all on the same flight. It was really cool. Really interesting experience. The flight itself was not great, but I kind of got over it because I'm just sandwiched in a little plane with all these awesome people. Once we got down there, it was great too. Senior Bowl is an awesome experience. You can make it down because the practices are open to the public. It's just you want to have field access to actually talk to guys. You have to get your media credentials, obviously. And so, the whole experience was awesome. You get a chance to go, you should absolutely go. It was great.
So
the weather's a little unpredictable, but it was an amazing experience. And yeah, I'd love to. We got to go on the field after every practice session, talk with the players for 10, 15 minutes. They had a media breakfast on the second day in the morning, and that's the podium sessions. You have podium sessions with players. Players are just sitting at tables. You can walk up to them and say, hey, can I grab you for a minute? Just film them, just talk to them, for have a normal conversation with the guys for a few minutes. And that was really awesome to have that opportunity.
Now, I do want to say two things real quick. One, you definitely called Andrew Siciliano, or whatever his name. You called him Dobby. You said the guy with the ears. That's something special. I don't hate it. You're not wrong.
It's a defining physical characteristic. That's the only reason I recognized him besides the NFL logo on the laptop. That's the only reason. I feel bad because I was looking. I was thinking glances over at him every now and then. So I know this guy. I've seen this guy before. I just have to figure out in my mind where he's from.
So you looked at his first. It was the NFL laptop. Then, boom, ears.
And then the ears. Yeah.
You're not wrong. But
I'm not wrong, but I'm also wrong for not identifying him that way.
Why would you say something so brave yet so controversial? All right. So ears aside, dropping Renner, you get there, you're on the field. Which was one of the players that you were most excited to interview?
I wanted to talk to both the MAC defensive ends, Carl Brooks and Thomas Nkouma. I didn't get to talk to either of them. Media availability during the media brunch in the morning on the second day was really good. You could talk to basically any of the guys you want. Media availability after the practice is an absolute scrub. Everyone's trying to run out there. Everyone's trying to talk with everyone. Some players don't want to talk to people because it's after the practices. They're tired. They just want to go back to the hotel, wherever they're staying, back to the locker room. So I got to talk to a dozen, 14, 15 guys. I talked to a lot of dudes. But it was also a bit of hey, pick your battles and just go find the guy who's not talking to anyone at that point in time and grab him essentially. Because it is a lot of media personnel. There's a lot of people who are credentialed. Everyone wants to talk. So it's kind of just find who's not talking to someone at that point in time and just ask them for their time. Just talk to them for a few minutes. But I got to talk to a bunch of really cool guys. Not everyone I was looking for, but I got to have a lot of interactions with future NFL players, which is pretty awesome.
Give me some names. Who were some of the guys you spoke to?
Yep, I'm pulling up my list right now. So I got oh boy. All right, so here's the issue. I'm going to say his last name. Adib Awari, the interior defensive lineman from Northwestern, who had some really good practices late in the week. I talked to him for a while. Dylan Horton, the edge from TCU, Isaiah Foskey, both the Clemson guys, Davis Allen, KJ Henry, Ivan Pace Jr., Julius Brents, Jaron Hall, I talked to for a little while, Tyson Bagent, it was on a podium. I got to speak with him. Luke Musgrave was on a podium. I talked to John Michael Schmitz, the offensive lineman from Minnesota, Steve Avila, the offensive lineman from TCU, Cody Mock, I talked to for a little bit on a podium. So JL Skinner as well, Rajon Wright, the cornerback from Oregon State. So a bunch of guys I had a chance to talk to. Tyler Lacey from Oklahoma State as well. But yeah, like I said, it is a bit of a hit or miss situation after practices because it is such a media scrum to try to get guys' attention.
Now, before we continue, I want to remind everyone it's been a while, but your best bet for sportsbook and casino sites is betting.net. Head on over to betting.net for extensive reviews on the best sportsbooks out there. So you're there. You've got a list of players you spoke to. What was the toughest part about being down there? What was it like?
Toughest part is probably transportation, I would say. Getting to the field was not an issue. My hotel was pretty cheap. It's pretty close to the field. It's like a 5-minute drive from the field, which is South Alabama Stadium, the home of the Jaguars. So that's where you had the practice. That's where all the actual content is captured for the most part. That's easy. It's a 5-minute drive. It's a really cheap Uber. The difficult part is that the media brunch is downtown. Getting your credentials is all downtown. And of course, you want to go out at night. You want to try to network at night. It's all downtown as well. That's a 30-minute drive from the stadium, about a 30-minute drive from my hotel, and it's about a $25 to $30 Uber every time you go down or back. So
damn.
The expensive part was not the hotel, was not the plane ticket. It was actually Ubering back and forth from downtown 2 to 4 times a day, depending on the situation, just to be able to be involved with everything going on. That was probably the most difficult part of it, is you waste a lot of time just traveling and having to plan out your travels. The first night I was down there, I was out until 2 o'clock in the morning, and me not thinking straight. There aren't many Ubers at 2 o'clock in the morning, Dan. So I was sitting outside a bar for 45 minutes waiting for my Uber to show up. That's kind of how
rookie move.
Yeah, it was a rookie move in part. That's kind of how it is. I mean, really, a lot of people, if you have the money and you have an organization that's paying your way down there, they'll let you stay at the same hotel as the players, which is basically just a glass castle, essentially, sitting in the middle of downtown Mobile. It's a really nice, fancy-looking hotel with that bar and everything inside. It's really, really nice. I could never afford to stay there, at least not right now. So a lot of people stay down there, and it makes it easier for them, although they have to travel to the practice facility, and they still have to do that 30-minute drive back and forth every day. But they're at home base to meet with a lot of players individually. And they have to basically essentially walk to the conference center, which is right across the road, which makes it a lot easier. But don't hang out bars, is Mike Good Pastor.
Yep. Mike, always good to give us a nugget of wisdom. Thank you, Mike. And listen to Mike. Stop hanging out at bars with strange men until 2 o'clock in the morning in strange cities.
Hey, I was talking to NFL personnel. I had to meet some other people in the media. I talked with some agents. I had a good time being able to build some connections down there. But honestly, I think what I enjoyed most was definitely the practices. Like, the nightlife is cool, being able to meet guys from across the industry. But really, the best chance to meet people in the media was during the practice sessions, just going up and talking to people you might recognize, or just essentially starting conversations about what's going on in the field. One of the more difficult parts I don't think people talk about with regards to the practices is you can't watch everything. You have to pick and choose what you're watching for a day. It's almost like you're just better off picking a position group per day to go with and just sticking with that one group the entire practice. Because if you try to watch everything, you're going to miss a lot. And you're really not going to be able to really evaluate a player's practice day if you just watch one drill and then bounce to another position. That's kind of how it was for me on Monday, was just filling out what to do. From that point on, I just made sure to focus on certain position drills, focus on certain team drills, and go from there.
Okay.
But I don't think people talk about enough about the fact that you have to really focus in on and watch one group instead of trying to watch the entire practice, because it's just not, you're not able to do it. I mean, because you have got guys playing near, like, it essentially divide the field in threes. You got like the one end zone, the other end zone in the middle of the field. They're running drills in all three sections.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're also running drills on the far side of the field in all three sections as well. And you can't really keep track of all those things. The media are only allowed on one half of the field, essentially, one half of the stands. The other side of the stands is reserved for NFL personnel. So if you're the guys you want to watch are on that side of the field for that portion of practice, you're really not going to get a good look at them. You want to focus on what's available to you at the given time. So essentially just figuring out where to look and how to evaluate that way. It was something I kind of knew going in because I had talked to some people and they gave me some advice on it, but something that was a little more apparent and more challenging than I expected initially.
All right. Now last thing, real quick, spill the beans. Of all the media guys, NFL guys, whoever else you met, who was the easiest to approach and who was the least approachable? Got to hear this.
All right, most approachable. Well, the Draft Network guys, I've talked to the Draft Network guys for like 2 years at this point. Like, I've talked to them for a long time. They knew how I was, so I was able to walk up and just immediately once I saw them, like, hey, introduce myself, and it was cool from that point on. Even after practice, they sometimes let me into like the section they had set aside for sponsors, like the Draft Network, PFF, like people who were partnering with them. They let me into that section briefly after practices closed down for like the first and second day, just to talk. So those were the easiest people to walk up to and interact with. Renner was actually the most difficult one. Like, Renner was someone who I don't think I really got to have a conversation with, just because Renner looks like he's either going somewhere every time or he's mad. Like, it looks like he's got that resting face that makes you feel like he doesn't want to talk.
Yes.
Yeah. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. That's what it looks like. So Renner is probably the most difficult person to approach. I did talk to Ben Solak. I did talk to Tursikama. I talked to the person who runs most of the draft content for the Philly Inquirer. I talked to a bunch of our people in the media as well. Some people for Touchdown Wire. So I got to talk with a lot of people. But yeah, I think Renner was probably the one. I didn't really get to talk to him that much, even though we did kind of talk a little bit going into the plane, but not really talk football that much.
Okay.
So he was probably the one that was most difficult to approach. Matt Miller was there. I saw him the first day. I thought I would, I'll get him later in the week. I don't think Matt Miller was there later in the week, or at least not sitting where he was with the media again.
Well,
so
probably not.
I did miss that opportunity because he was there for the first practice, which, by the way, I guess it's supposed to be really cold and rainy in Mobile most of the time. The first practice was like 75 degrees outside, and the real field with the sun was like 90. So, and I'm out there wearing like full-on pants and stuff. I was sweating so much. I was dying. I got sunburned. I had sunburn for 3 weeks afterwards.
No,
it was bad. It was bad. But then I was like, all right. So I overcompensated. The next day, the real field was like 45 degrees outside. And I was freezing cold because I was wearing shorts and stuff. So I couldn't win. But it was still a really cool experience.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Now, I'm a little jelly, but it's fine. It's fine. Maybe I'll get there next year. We'll see. We'll see what I'm doing.
You did get to go to the draft last year, though.
I did, and fingers crossed, hoping maybe I go this year. It is in Kansas City. It was a lot of fun last year. Now I'll know what I'm getting into and what I'm doing, so I can be a little bit more open. I was kind of just to my table and talking to the people around my table and stuff like that. I didn't really branch out, but now I'm gonna walk down there like I owned a joint. I'm gonna walk in, kick in the door, stand up during those player interviews. Dan Kornhauser, the grueling truth. Let's talk something real special.
Yeah, I mean that's how it was too. That's how it was when I was like for the first day I was there. I was very like I didn't really know how to approach people for that because it was kind of like the first. Let's be honest, I was a senior in college during COVID, so like there was no access to players, there was no access to anything like that. So I didn't get to work with any live events. But like after the first day, it's like, you got to realize these people are willing to talk. Like the players are willing to talk, media's willing to talk. Even like NFL agents, they want to talk. They want to hear opinions. So it's all right to walk up to guys and just want to talk. It's okay to maybe nudge some slightly older individuals out of the way when trying to conduct player interviews when there's a media scrum. It's all right to like shoot your shot and be like confident with what you're saying, essentially. So I think that's something that I think you have to realize if you're newer to it and just starting out. Like you got to be, I wouldn't say aggressive, but you got to be willing to be a little bit more assertive in those conversations and being willing to just trust yourself to conduct things properly.
I like it. I like it a lot, and you're not wrong. But let's move on. We've talked about the Senior Bowl, your experiences there. It sounds awesome. If you go next year, I'll see you there. Something real nice. Show you how to live dangerously in Mobile, Alabama, I guess. But no. All right. So now that we're done with that, let's move on. We still have a lot to go over. Now, the scouting combine is pretty much underway. Defensive linemen have already been there for a few days. D linemen and linebackers have been there for a few days. Quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends are getting there. I think today or yesterday is when the quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends got there. They're doing everything staggered now. So the D line and the linebackers got there first. They did their interviews, their medical checks. They met with teams, so on and so forth, orientation, etc. Then the next group shows up a couple of days later. And now that we're in midweek, I think the defensive linemen and the linebackers will be performing on-field workouts tomorrow. We'll also get those measurements. Then it really kicks off. I think is it DBs and special teamers that are next? I have to double.
Yeah, so yep, you think you're looking at the same schedule I am. I think we got linebackers D-line tomorrow. Then it's DB special teamers on Friday.
Yep.
They also have some work on Saturday as well. And after that, we get into Saturday. It's really QB, wide receiver, tight end. That's the people really want to see. Mm-hmm. They're also there on Sunday.
Yep.
And then we got finish up with O-line and the running back group.
They're
going to be there Sunday and Monday. So,
yep. Yeah, we're looking at the same thing on NFL Combine.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're in lockstep on that front. So we'll be talking about the scouting combine in depth as our final segment on this episode. But I do want to talk about some players individually on a broader spectrum, because like we said coming into it, we haven't talked about this since the national championship, and a whole lot has changed. All right. So let's talk about the story of the day. I mean, this was going to come up sooner or later. Jalen Carter, big news. He was at the scouting combine, met with teams, and he left the scouting combine because in Georgia, there's a warrant out for his arrest in connection to a car accident that happened in 2022. And it involved a staff member from Georgia. It involved one of the players, I believe, as well. And a couple of other people were also involved in the accident and injured. But I think there was at least 2 deaths. And he was questioned. And now he's got a warrant out for a couple of misdemeanors. That's a huge deal. Not only because he's involved in a situation where there's at least 2 fatalities, but it's a big deal also for the warrant for the 2 misdemeanors. And yes, they're misdemeanors. Oh, it's not a big deal. Some people, I've seen some people saying online and whatnot, but it is something that teams have to consider, especially also considering, I mean, we've talked on this very show earlier in the season about the rumors of his off the field issues, that rumblings out of Georgia, there are some character concerns. Now, at the time, it was just McShay who had reported it months ago, and everybody shot it down. We talked about it on this very show. I asked you about it if you had any concerns. You had absolutely no concerns at the time. And you know what? A lot of people were in the same boat. A lot of people just piled on McShay, and a lot of people said, oh, well, my sources are saying the polar opposite. So we didn't really know where we stood. But McShay broke it. There is some relevance to that today because, again, those reports are coming out, and it's not just coming from McShay. So there's off-the-field questions prior to this. Now there's the 2 misdemeanors. He lied to police twice. I think he actually changed his story twice. I think at first he said he was a mile away or something like that. Then he changed it to, oh, I was next to them in a car next to them or something like that. But now apparently I guess he was involved in some street racing situation, which is why the driver of the other vehicle got into the accident, or part of it. The driver of the accident also had above the legal limit for blood alcohol. There's a lot to uncover there. There's a lot to think about there. Just thinking purely on the business side of things, the draft side of things, how do you think this affects his stock at this point moving forward?
Yeah, it's really tough to say. I was saying the McShay report was more like on a person-to-person level, saying like he was hard to relate with teammates. Like he wasn't relating with teammates well. He wasn't getting along with coaches, that kind of stuff.
Right,
So
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. This is a completely different world we're living in with this situation because it is obviously so prominent. There were 2 people who were killed in that car accident, obviously, like you mentioned. And right now, I will say it's pretty tough to say if his draft stock will or won't suffer from this. It's kind of premature because we don't have all the information yet.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly seems like they're gathering a lot of information very quickly, or at least they're starting to release information quickly in Georgia. And we'll find out probably before the draft, which is still about 2 months away, what the punishment's going to be for Jalen Carr for the situation, or if he's going to be cleared or not. If he gets cleared, I can't imagine this really impacts it too much. The punishment I saw can be either $1,000 fine community service, or I think 1 year in jail potentially. So it's a pretty significant difference depending on how this goes from here legally.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I can't really give you a clean answer whether this will affect him or not.
Fair.
I think in the NFL, we've seen that talent almost always trumps off-field concerns and stuff like that. If there hadn't been a car crash on that day, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds for this one because obviously the more important storyline here is that 2 people died in that car accident. But if there hadn't been a car crash that day, and the police kind of flagged this under the radar, that was like, oh, they were caught speeding on a traffic stop or like on a camera, a stoplight or whatever. They were caught speeding. Mm-hmm. And they got a ticket for speeding. Well, a lot of players in the NFL have gotten ticketed for speeding over the years, including some like Juju Smith-Schuster even posted on like, I don't know if it's TikTok, on Instagram one time, it was like he was driving 120 miles per hour and he showed his speedometer while he's in the middle of the highway. And it's guys in the NFL do stupid stuff like that all the time. Unfortunately, most of them get away with it without hurting someone else or themselves. People will obviously go back to the Henry Ruggs situation and look to that in regards to this, because that's something that happened most recently with a highly drafted player, and certainly a prominent situation where someone did die as a result of drunk driving as well. There's a large spectrum of outcomes to look at when comparing this situation to others that we've seen. Like I said, I really don't know how this can go. I do know from Ian Rappaport, a report he had, NFL teams met with Carter yesterday, and they were doing the whole interview process. And this did not come up. This did not come up in the interview process. This was not asked about. So I don't know if
do you think that's because now I want to ask the question already kind of sort of knowing the answer, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think it's because the teams didn't know, which I think they know everything. They're like the government. If they want to know something about you, they'll find out. It's very simple. But is it do you think they maybe are acting like they didn't know about it because it didn't come out publicly, or do they just did not care at this point because it's quote unquote just misdemeanors?
Yeah, I think actually some of them probably didn't know, because Georgia, I can guarantee Georgia know. I will almost be willing to bet that certain members of the Georgia Bulldogs football team were aware, like the upper staff, the upper management of the team were aware of what went on there. Georgia, obviously, and Kirby Smart released a statement today saying like all the generic stuff without, like, basically saying something without saying something. Essentially, you know how it goes. All the generic stuff in response to moments of crisis.
Yeah,
he didn't write the statement. Obviously, someone else wrote it for him. But yeah, I think some NFL teams probably weren't fully aware of the situation because Carter had told 2 different stories to the police, according to reports. So I think sometimes, I mean, even NFL teams can be pretty intrusive, but sometimes, like, just out of respect, I don't think they would have always brought this up.
Yeah.
And they might have brought up the situation, but they probably weren't aware that 2 misdemeanor charges were coming down the line the following day. I think that would have had to have been brought up at some point. So I think genuinely some NFL teams were not aware that this was going to happen. I think otherwise they really probably would have brought it up. And frankly, if they were aware and they didn't bring it up, I'd be pretty surprised, because usually they, at least from a character standpoint, would want to ask questions to find out. Like, they might know about the situation, but at least from a character perspective, we want to know the thought process, or at least want to know why this happened. Like, why were you involved in the situation? This is something we have to worry about with you once we draft you, potentially getting involved in again.
Okay, that's fair. Now, going into the scouting combine, where do you have Jalen Carter on your big board?
Let me pull up real quick.
I preface that by saying I know you released your big board on the 19th. And I have got him too. And I have it on my big board consensus chart, which I'll bring up in a little bit. But has your big board changed for you since then?
Regarding Carter, I think I'm really in a wait and see pattern with Carter. Like I don't know, man. Like I just generally don't know how to respond to something like this. So I'm just kind of gonna leave it right now. I've got a mock draft I'm working on right now where he is like a top 5 pick.
Yep.
I haven't published it yet. I'm probably gonna leave him there because, like I said, I don't really know how to respond to the situation yet. I think we'll know a lot more once the legal process plays out over the next hopefully month and a half or so. Give us a few weeks before the actual NFL draft to know what's going to happen here with regards to the Carter situation. And again, like the important things here are knowing, one, the character of Carter, which I don't really have a way of knowing. I don't get a chance to talk to him at any point.
Right.
And two, what's the legal implications here? Is he going to have to spend time in prison? Is he going to just have to do some community service and pay $1,000 fine?
Yeah.
I mean, example team availability is essentially what it comes down to. Do we know his character? We want to know his availability. And we don't really know. I don't know the character. I have really no way of knowing the character. And the availability we'll all know by the time the NFL draft comes around, hopefully.
Okay. Now, before we move on to the next rumor, because time's actually flying in this episode, I do want to remind our viewers that The Grueling Truth is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sportsbook that is right for you. So head on over to betting.net. So moving on from Jalen Carter. Now, this was a bombshell. We haven't seen something like this involving a top pick since La'el Collins, who went from a likely first-round pick to totally undrafted because of some legal issues, which ended up being absolutely nothing at all. It didn't end up costing him any real money, I guess, overall in the grand scheme of things, other than his rookie contract, I guess. But it still dropped the potential first-round pick to undrafted. Before that, you had what's his face, a tackle from Ole Miss that got caught smoking.
Laramie Tunsil, yeah.
Tunsil, yep, got caught smoking weed. Went from a likely top 3 pick to the teens, early teens, and I mean, his story's a lot better than La'el Collins, but this doesn't happen that often. And Carter, in a lot of circles, is considered the top prospect. Period.
Yeah.
So it's worthwhile, and it's worth keeping an eye on moving forward. Now, let's move on to the next point. Quarterbacks. Everyone's always talking about quarterbacks, okay? We're going into the scouting combine. One of the big storylines is that Bryce Young will not be throwing, but the other 3 likely top 10 overall quarterbacks will be throwing. That's Richardson from Florida, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, and Will Levis from Kentucky. They'll be throwing. They're going to put on a show, okay? The big rumor of the last couple of weeks has been skyrocketing stock for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Now, Richardson might be the most polarizing prospect in this entire draft class because he is an enigma. He has all the talent that you could possibly look for. I've heard Cam Newton. I've heard a cross between Cam Newton and a guy like Jalen Hurts. I've heard all sorts of things. He's a special athlete with a rocket arm, prototype size, but a lot of questions. Far more questions than a guy like Trey Lance. Because Trey Lance, the concern was, he started for a year, then he played one game, was awful in that one game, then he got hurt and was out for the rest of the year. We didn't really have a good idea of what he could do. But his 1 year as a starter, albeit on a lower level, 1 interception the whole season. Dominated, put up video game stats. You can't even do that in NCAA Football 14 on Xbox, okay? Believe me, as good as I am at that game over the last, 8 years or whatever, I've tried. 1 interception on the season. Unless you're playing on rookie, which I ain't doing, you're not throwing 1 pick, even with a 99 everything quarterback, all right? It's just a matter of fact. But Trey Lance did it. And he still had a ton of questions coming out, okay? Rich, on the other hand, I'm a Gators fan. I watch all the games every Saturday. Disgusted for the most part the last couple of years, but it's fine. When I think of Anthony Richardson, all I can think of are all his missed passes. This is the guy who barely completed 50% of his passes. Yes, he played really well against Utah. Really well. Florida won that game. They were the underdog. It was very impressive. But I think he failed to throw a touchdown pass in the first month and a half of the season. I think it was the 5th or 6th game or something like that he ended up throwing his first touchdown pass. And sure, stats are in everything, especially in college when you're translating from college ranks to the NFL. But you got to give me something, dude. And even beyond that, I'm not impressed. Coming into this whole process, while other people are talking about first-round pick, I'm thinking he's more Malik Willis range at this point. 3rd rounder. Now, this was, again, going into the offseason. I'm thinking 3rd round pick, raw, just clay that you can mold. Has literally everything you look for. But he can't complete a pass, short or intermediate. It's a problem. He's a playmaker. He can run with the best of them, but you're a quarterback. You're supposed to win from the pocket to be successful. Running is great. It's wonderful. It wins regular season games. It makes you exciting. It makes you a lot of money. Your team might even win some games. Look at Lamar Jackson. But when it comes time to really make that money, when it comes time to compete for chips, what separates the not quite rights and champions are having that quarterback who can win from the pocket. It's all fun and games, but that's what it comes down to at the end of the game. At the end of the day. And he lacks. So why the meteoric rise? What are these NFL teams seeing that I'm not? Now, I don't think he's still a 3rd rounder, maybe a 2nd rounder. But that's just because of the tools. Where do you stand on this guy?
He's going to be measuring 6'4", 6'5", potentially 245, 250 pounds, and he's going to run in the 4.4s.
Yeah.
He's going to go in the 1st round. I mean, this is not.
No, I know he is. I'm not saying he's not, but in terms of
where do I stand with him? I think
he's
my concern with Richardson is I think he's more of I have him outside my top 30 in my prospect list. I think I have him. Let me look real quick. But my concern with Richardson is that he's a year away from being a year away, which I think is something you'll hear a lot about him. I have him at 38.
I would say you have him at 38. Yep.
Yeah. And the concern with it, when I say a year away from being a year away, essentially, I mean, he's not going to be a Mahomes player in terms of he sits his rookie year and then he's ready to go. He's going to have to sit probably 2 years into his rookie deal, and then he's going to have to see the field. And we already have people talking about Chicago and the Bears with Justin Fields saying, "Oh, trade Justin Fields away because he's 2 years into his rookie contract, and you want to just reset that rookie deal."
Awful.
But we've seen a year from Justin Fields. And granted, his passing numbers, his passing efficiency is not really good. Fields, that is, his rushing ability is really what carried him this past year in terms of efficiency. But we have actual game tape, and he has actual NFL experience. We're talking about Richardson potentially sitting for 2 years and then finally starting to play. So it's a tough situation with him. Obviously, the natural, the physical gifts are insane there. The arm talent, the ability to drive the ball with velocity, the ability to run, break tackles at that size and speed is, again, why you get the Cam Newton comps, why you sometimes get Josh Allen type comparisons with Richardson. I think there are a lot of good throws on tape, but you can probably find a lot of good throws on tape for just about everybody, really, being at the quarterback position. It's easy to make a mixtape with all the great plays that you have in the season. So there are the flashes for Richardson, but overall, the consistency for me is even more inconsistent than something like Will Levis. I'm not a Will Levis fan. I think he's probably got a better shot going first overall than Richardson at this point.
Agreed.
He's probably got a better shot at going first overall than CJ Stroud. But Levis is older. He's got all the physical tools again, the arm talent, the velocity. He's got mobility, not as much mobility as Richardson, but he's got mobility. But he comes from an NFL system. And this past year, he played poorly because he had a bad offensive coordinator and he had no weapons. Essentially, he lost 3 offensive linemen to the previous draft. He lost his top receiver. His running back was suspended at the start of the year. Just an absolute mess in Kentucky. Richardson had a little bit more to work with at Florida. Granted, the offense was also a mess. So I think he's also in a bad situation for himself. He didn't really get to showcase himself very well. No, the offense was absolutely trashed there around him. I mean, it was bad. Yeah, it was bad for us. So I think the difficult part is we didn't get to see either of these guys play what I would consider quarterback-friendly systems. We didn't get to see him play with really good offensive coaches.
Well, hold on. Napier's system is fairly quarterback friendly. We saw Louisiana Lafayette quarterbacks put up nice stats.
Yes, they were good numbers there, but that was also a bit of a difference in competition when you go to the SEC and you look at what you're working with at receiver for Florida is Justin Shorter, who is like I know my Justin Shorter type players because I have a lot of them at Clemson right now. They're big and they don't separate. So it's the kind of what you're working with. So I think the difficult part for this is we really never got a chance to see those guys compete with good supporting casts. Will Levis even opted out of the Senior Bowl. Like, we didn't even get a chance to see him come down. We really could have used the quarterback like Will Levis at the Senior Bowl. We really could have. It was not good.
No.
So it's just a really weird situation where you're working with imperfect tape for the most part, especially for Richardson, and you're just trying to go based almost entirely on projection. You're shooting your shot with these guys, and there's no perfect answer. Like, the draft in general is a crapshoot anyways. It's always a lottery. Even the guys you can be certain are going to be great players sometimes bust. It's even worse than that this year because it's not really great. It's not really a very talented draft class. You've got a lot of small players like Bryce Young. Even at other positions like a running back and wide receiver, you have a lot of small guys. Then you've got the Will Levis and Anthony Richardsons of the world who are physically gifted. But in terms of like their actual development, their decision-making, their accuracy on down-to-down base miss, their ability to actually hit throws in clutch time moments and be able to read and diagnose coverages mid-play is just not where you want them to be for an NFL quarterback. The best case scenario for both those guys is like the Josh Allen arc, where the first 2 years you are one of the 5 worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And then third year comes around and it's just like, oh, hallelujah, there you are. You're now an MVP candidate. That's
that's how it goes. Oh, hey, you go from you fucking ass to, oh, hey, now you're an MVP candidate. Hey, come on over.
Yeah, and the issue with that is there's only been like that jump for Josh Allen from year 2 to year 3. Statistically, is the most impressive jump by a quarterback in NFL history from 1 year to the next. Essentially, it just doesn't happen. Remember, people were talking about Daniel Jones making that jump like 2 years ago, and it made no sense. Because it doesn't happen. It's a one-for-one type situation. If you're counting on that happening for a quarterback, you are going to lose your job because it's not going to happen. Now, if it happened with Jalen Hurts, maybe, but you say, okay, well, there's a good supporting cast there. There was a lot of help for him to be able to make that leap from year 2 to year 3. Maybe that's more of the progression you're looking for an Anthony Richardson type player.
Okay.
Look, I wouldn't want to be betting on one of those guys if I was the team looking for a quarterback.
Now, looking at the top of the draft, another big rumor of today is the Carolina Panthers are apparently locked in on Richardson. Now, one has to wonder, is that because they think that's most likely who's going to be left on the board when they pick at 9, assuming they don't trade up? Or is it really that they really think they can do something there? Because the Carolina Panthers, they went from a very questionable coaching hire in Rule to a staff of NFL veterans. The Carolina Panthers have an exquisite coaching staff, and it's littered on both sides of the ball with guys who are former offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, assistant, like head coaches, like littered across the roster.
Lots of former players too.
And lots of former players, which is key when you're trying to develop young guys. You want those former players as your position coaches and whatnot. So the coaching staff is lined up very nicely, okay? And they are pretty much a blank slate on offense. Is the rumor of them locking in on Richardson, is that because they want him, or is that because they think that's what they're going to get and that they got to make it sound good?
I think if it's true, it's probably because they genuinely want him. NFL teams, some teams, poorly run teams, will force themselves to take quarterbacks they don't actually like.
Nice. Poorly run teams.
Yes. But not every team. I think the Panthers are in a position where they want to get their guy, and especially in this quarterback class where you have a historically undersized player like Bryce Young. You've got kind of the definition of what I would consider like mediocrity in CJ Stroud. Now, granted, he was a great college quarterback, but a system in Ohio State that has not translated to the NFL for quarterbacks so far. as well as not possessing like elite physical tools in any given area, which is why I call him like a mediocre guy in that sense, at least for this draft class. You got Richardson, the 1-year wonder, was really developmental, and Will Levis, who is kind of just a little bit of everything to some extent. I have a feeling most teams will at most 2 quarterbacks from this draft class. Most teams are going to like at most 2. Most teams probably will only have 1 guy that like. They're not going to be a lot of teams that are going to be like, oh, if we don't get QB X, we'll just take QB Z. It's not going to be that way for most teams. A lot of them will only have 1 or 2 guys they really like in this situation. So the Panthers are genuinely leaking out that they like Anthony Richardson. And granted, this is lying season, so we get a lot of lies about this time of year. But if it's true, I think they probably do because they genuinely like Anthony Richardson. And you look at the quarterbacks that Reich has coached over the years, a lot of guys are toolsy. No one is quite as big as Richardson, but a lot of toolsy guys who have like developmental upside, that kind of stuff. So Reich has been around these kind of players before. And the offensive line in Carolina, for the most part, is going to come back from last year. It's developing. It's a young group. It's a pretty solid group as far as offensive lines go in the modern NFL. You have DJ Moore. You had a good running game last year despite not having a star running back after you traded away CMC. So I think you have some pieces to build with on offense to make you feel like you have a chance to develop a quarterback similar to what Philadelphia has done with Jalen Hurts to some extent, having that good offensive line, having at least at one point, a 1-star receiver, then adding in there eventually to build up from there. I wouldn't be shocked if Carolina is kind of targeting that kind of approach.
Now, let's do a mini mock draft. I didn't mention this to you in the pre-show, but I wanted to surprise not only you, but our viewers, okay? Yeah, because whatever. But here we are. So a mini mock draft, okay, but just focusing on the top 4 quarterbacks. Okay, Young, Stroud, Levis, Richardson. I want you to put each of those quarterbacks with, at least at this point, what you think is their most likely destination come draft day. By any means, whether it be trade or just straight up the guy fall into a particular pick. Let's see. Because I know you said you're doing a mock draft that you haven't released.
Yeah, I'm going to give you
so you should have this like ready to go.
I do. I have it ready to go. I'm looking at it right now and trying to figure out a way to defend myself from when the questions start flying.
Be ready.
All right. So, Colts, I think it's not uncommon to see the Colts trading up to first overall. I have the Colts trading up for first overall to get Will Levis.
Oh,
I just think
that's what I did in my mock draft a month ago.
Yeah, I think it's become a more popular thing to mock, and I think it's just because it fits. I mean, it fits generally. They have an unhinged owner in Irsay who's a little bit off his rocker to some extent. They've got a GM who's probably going to get fired next year.
Don't shit on Irsay, okay? There's nothing wrong with living the party life. He likes strippers, cocaine, and getting Wendy's at 2:00 in the morning butt naked. He's living, all right? But go on.
Yeah, so you got a situation where the leadership in that team, from a player personnel standpoint, might be a little compromised.
Oh my God.
A GM who might be on his way out and Chris Ballard, like you got situations to deal with there. I think Will Levis going first overall is highly likely just because of the physical tools alone. I've got the Raiders actually moving up to get Anthony Richardson, and it makes, from a Raiders perspective, in terms of what they've done historically, them going for the big, fancy, flashy quarterback is kind of what the Raiders do, which is part of the reason why I have them doing this, but also because I think if it wasn't for the fact that the Raiders didn't have a ton of money in their ownership group, Josh McDaniels probably would have been fired after 1 year. Really, like they have to make a splash move now, and they don't have a quarterback they don't have a legit quarterback on the roster. They cut Derek Carr. I think Jarrett Stidham's a free agent. Like they don't have a QB to play with right now, and unless you're getting Aaron Rodgers, I don't think you're going to find one in free agency you're going to love.
Actually, to that end, they came out and said they're out of the Rodgers sweepstakes.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, maybe you can go get Jimmy Garoppolo if you want, but I think at that point, Anthony Richardson you might as well just, if you're going to sign Jimmy Garoppolo with that roster, you might as well just cut yourselves at the end of the season and fire yourselves because it's really not setting up to be a great situation. At least with Richardson, you can say we have a guy we can develop for the future and probably buy yourself another year.
Gross. Jimmy Garoppolo in Las Vegas. Yuck. Pineapples. I hate it. I hate it so much. But go on.
Going on from there, I actually do have Carolina getting Stroud. I know we said Richardson going there would make a lot of sense. I could see that happening, certainly, but in this case, he's just not on the board for that. Stroud has some, I wouldn't say he has a ton of similarities to Carson Wentz, but he has a few. I know the comp for him, the more popular comp for him has been Jared Goff, I know in recent days.
Gross.
I think Stroud has enough physical tools where he will meet the parameters that Carolina is looking for. And I think they do have that offensive line to provide him the time he needs to help develop his post-snap reads, which I know have been a big issue for him. Pre-snap is usually quite fine from what I've seen, but post-snap's where the issues that come into play. So he's going to need some time to work that out. I think Carolina has the offensive line to give him that opportunity.
And you had Bryce Young going.
I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trading up to get Bryce Young.
Oh, yuck. That's
Dude,
it. That's what it was.
You're not going to like it. Here's the thing. You're not going to like it wherever he goes.
No.
Like, there's no.
You know what? Listen, I wouldn't mind it if you went the consensus route and either had him going first overall by a trade to the Texans or the Colts or whoever, or if you had him going second or whatever, that's fine, because that's probably what's going to end up happening. But what pick do you have him actually getting selected at with that
10.
Tampa Bay trade up?
10 is Tampa Bay. Yeah. So it's probably the lowest he's gone in most mocks, I would guess. I haven't looked at a ton of mocks, so I wanted to kind of dive in here because I haven't done mocks since like December. This is one of the first ones since December potentially. So,
and I can tell because you're rusty.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was doing this at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to have a little bit of chaos theory involved in the situation.
Yes.
So because again, like I could print the same like top 3 everyone else is printing essentially right now. I just wanted to have a little bit of like fun with it. And my idea was, well, you get Tampa Bay to trade up to get Bryce Young because they have legitimately no quarterbacks on the roster. I'm pretty sure Blaine Gabbert's a free agent. Brady retired. Well, they have Trask, but
I was gonna say listen, hold on a second.
The Gators fan here.
Number one, as a Gators fan, I questioned that selection of Trask because, yeah, I know he played well his last year at Florida. Statistically, they won a bunch of games. Wildly unimpressive. Very ho-hum. Okay, and going to the NFL, second-round pick, a little rich for my blood. Probably would have been more comfortable taking him like the 4th round or something like that. But, to his credit, Tampa Bay's been talking him up since Brady retired. Now, I don't know if that's because, as you said, he's literally the only guy on the roster worth a damn talking about at the quarterback position, or if they actually believe the nonsense that they're spewing. I'm not sure, but when I look at the fan pages and the beat writers and whatever tweeting and their articles and stuff like that, because I'm a fiend, and yes, I check Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat writer articles and stuff like that. Yes, okay, the Pewter Report, yes, I check that out. And all the reports are positive on Trask. I'm not buying it, and honestly, if somehow Bryce Young were to fall past Houston, past Indy, past Carolina, past Vegas, then Tampa Bay trading up for him, they're probably trading at least a couple of first-round picks, maybe more, to do so, to move from, where are they, in the late teens or whatever? Early 20s?
Let me find that for you real quick. They are in 19.
To move up from 19 to 10, you're at least giving up a couple of first-round picks. If they can pull that off.
I mean, there have been some. This is not a really good draft class. I don't know if you're giving up multiple firsts, to be honest.
What do you mean? If the Bucs are jumping up from 19 to 10, I mean, sure, it's not going to be gratuitous. They're not going to get 3 first-rounders like it's draft day and Sonny is trading up to get Bo Callahan. They're not going to get 3 first-round picks, but obviously their 19th overall pick this year, maybe a first-rounder next year, maybe a couple of mid-round picks.
So here's the trade from. Now, granted, this was maybe a bad trade to use the blueprint of.
I'm already
the trade for Minnesota to move up.
You mean Detroit to move up?
Yeah, Detroit to move up
The
where Jameson
Minnesota
went last
pick
year.
for Jameson, yeah.
Yeah, last year, where the Vikings got Lewis Seen. The Lions traded a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and that was it. And they got a first-round pick, and they got a second-round pick in return. And that was to go from 32 to 12.
Now, is that because of value, or is that because the Minnesota Vikings are run by a bunch of
I think it's
questionable decision makers?
Is it a new staff in Minnesota since that, or is it still the same staff that made that trade? I'm trying to remember what year. No, that would have been the new staff in Minnesota that made that
Last
deal.
year, yes, but
Yeah,
new GM, new coach, all that, right?
yeah. That was just a bad trade. I don't think that's gonna be the market value going forward. My hypothetical trade has Tampa Bay sending anything more value to Philadelphia than that. But yeah, I think it's still tough, man. I don't know. People obviously use that trade to try to justify driving down the market price, but I don't know. I mean, really, this year it comes down to what NFL teams think of this draft class. I look at spot 10, and really, there's maybe 5 or 6 guys who I actually like in this draft class to be top 10 players, and after that, I'm kind of throw my hands up a little bit.
So let's move on from the quarterbacks. All right. And before we jump into our next topic, which, as you see at the bottom, is going to be the scouting combine, I want to remind everybody that betting.net finds the best promotions, offers, and bonus codes, so you don't have to. Head over now to their website to take advantage of things like free bets and matching deposits over at betting.net. So I asked you about the quarterbacks, doing this little mock draft for quarterbacks, because I wanted to lead into the scouting combine. We had already mentioned earlier that 3 of the top 4 quarterbacks will be throwing. One of them, the one who's not throwing, is Bryce Young. So my question to you on that front is a couple of questions. One, is that a big deal over in the grand scheme of things for his draft stock? 2, do you think it's smart for him to do such a thing at this point with all the contention around him and the fact that there are still a lot of questions about him? And 3, are you buying the rumor that NFL teams are more concerned about his size than maybe the media is?
Yeah, I would buy that. I'm going to work your way backwards. Yeah, I would buy that. The NFL teams are more concerned than the media, because there are teams that base their draft style now historically on NFL analysis and NFL analytics, in terms of going back and viewing players who are this size, this weight, with this arm length, have a blank hit rate in the course of NFL history. Players with Bryce Young's size, weight, etc., there's never been a guy like that taken in the first round of the draft. People will point to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was probably going to play at maybe 30 pounds heavier than Bryce Young will play at. It's probably maybe an inch taller. So it's a pretty significant difference. And even Kyler Murray's not stayed healthy during his time in the NFL.
No, he is not.
No, and he's had trouble seeing over the middle of the field, which is something you talk about with NFL quarterbacks who are smaller. So I think there's definitely a chance that there will be NFL teams that don't have him on the draft board, that just don't even have his name up there, because he does not meet the requirements they have in place to be a draftable player. He does not meet those physical requirements. So I think some teams will take him off the board entirely. Is it smart for him to not throw at the combine? I think it is smart, because he's going to pack on a ton of weight that he's not actually going to play with, because for whatever reason, he has to have a good weight at the combine, even though he's never going to play at that weight. So they're going to just stuff him full of peanut butter jelly sandwiches and hope he gets up 205 pounds. And hope he tells you 195 or 200 or something like that. And then he's going to lose all that weight. He's going to go to the bathroom immediately after weighing in, piss it all out. And he's going to go back down to weight 175, 180. And he'll go to his pro day, throw his pro day at his normal weight. Because frankly, even if I know it's not he's not going to run or anything like that, but if he was going to weigh 200, 205 pounds, just way overweight for a player with his size and his build, I think it would have to affect your ability to throw the ball somewhat. And he probably doesn't want to put that on tape. He probably does not want teams to see that. He doesn't want to put that out even frankly to the media nationally to spread that amongst fans, and people might have just a general consensus of him in terms of the media. So I think it's kind of smart. One, you make sure you're in your actual playing shape to throw. And two, you don't have to throw next to Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, guys who have arms that are significantly better than yours. I mean, those guys might be more inaccurate when you're throwing against air. And granted, like throwing against air with no defenders to wide receivers who are wearing no pads, it shouldn't really matter. Probably not. But at the same point, people do take away stuff from that kind of thing. And teams will look at that and see Richardson and Levis hitting 65-yard throws downfield, even Stroud connecting on 55-yard throws, and they'll look at Bryce Young, who's maybe, fully stepping into throws, maybe hitting 50 yards downfield. And they'll go, well, this doesn't look the same as the other three that we're looking at right now. And that's probably going to be why we don't see, that'll contribute to why we're not going to see him throw. I think it is smart for him ultimately not to throw because of that. And what was the first question you had?
I don't remember, but you did well.
Yeah, you did good. We probably hit on at some point.
Yeah, you were fine. Your answers were thorough. They were thoughtful. I like it. You answered everything you needed to. So let's move on from the quarterback position because there's a lot of others that we need to discuss and not a lot of time to do it. So we're not going to get to talk about the combine as much as I wanted to. We kind of went off on tangents on other fronts. But what are some names that you are looking at during the scouting combine process, seeing their workouts, see how they perform next to their peers? Who are you looking forward to watching? Now, listen, not to be clear, don't just give me some workout warriors, all right? Don't just give me a list of guys who are going to run fast and lift a lot, all right? Give me something special.
All right, for something special, that's going to be a bit hard to dig up for you. But something I'm interested in is how fast Kendrick Miller is going to run for TCU, because I really like Kendrick Miller on tape. I really do like him. I think he's the top 100 player in that sense. I know there are a lot of people who don't think he's a top 100 player because they're concerned he doesn't have like the speed or burst to reach that level. So I will be interested to see how he runs just to get a general feel for where he'll stack up in this draft class. And I feel that same way about like Evan Hull, to be clear, from Northwestern. I don't have him as a top 100 player, but I have him as like a mid fourth round player because he was really good at Senior Bowl. He's got really impressive tape at points. So I think those guys, even like Eric Gray from Oklahoma, how they run, how they move, and how they even catch during receiving drills will be pretty important for those players. The running back class is it's so interesting to talk about because you have those guys, you got like Devin Nightchain, Juice Vaughn, Tajay Spears, all these are really short dudes, even Keontae Mitchell from Eastern Carolina. One other guy who I really want to watch at the combine, I really want to see him move is Darnell Wright from Tennessee because he's in my opinion, his best fit in the NFL is like guard. I know people are like mocking him as a tackle.
Right.
Top 50 picks. Yeah, it's in the top 50 picks at this point, sometimes even in the first round. He's getting a lot of tackle love in mock drafts. He's got tackle size, but he's got guard mobility, in my opinion. Like he really does not move at the level I would hope for a tackle. Even DeJuan Jones, who is much bigger, moves better than Darnell Wright, in my opinion. So I think that's someone who I want to see move. I want to see how he operates in space to determine if he can defend the edge, if he can be someone who anchors on the outside. Also, someone who I think has gotten a lot of love recently within the past week or so, Steve Avila from TCU, who's by the way, a really good interview. I got to interview him at the combine, at the Senior Bowl, and I loved his responses. I know Brandon Thorne has gotten to interview him. He does the scouting for offensive linemen for Bleacher Report. He interviewed him, and he really loved him as well. I think it'll be interesting to see how he moves. He's able to get you out of tackle in a pinch if you need him to for a game. He's played center. He's played guard. I'll be really interested to see how he plays. He's projecting me as a guard in the NFL level. I want to see how he moves compared to the other guys because he could be a player who kind of gets up from that third round range into that second round range and ends up going maybe even top 50 depending on how he does at the combine and the interviews and all that whole process.
You mentioned a few players I wanted to touch on, but we are up against the clock. So I guess we'll just have to talk about it post-combine. And we'll have a few weeks leading up to the NFL draft that we can talk about all these different prospects. We'll definitely go over the NFL scouting combine. Oh, man, there's so much I want to talk about. But we got to wrap it up. Are there any thoughts, questions, common concerns that you want to mention at this point? Maybe combine related or anything?
I mean, I think we've hit on most of what we want to talk about. Just hopefully everyone gets through without no injuries, nothing like that. Hopefully, just able to go through, have a nice clean combine, and everyone tests without having to deal with any kind of groin pulls or anything like that. Any kind of ridiculous stuff.
No torn ACLs or torn
No,
Achilles
please, no.
or anything crazy like didn't know Jabo get hurt last year at the scouting combine on day 1 or something like that?
Yeah, I forget if that was
Like
the
his
combine.
pro day or some shit.
I just want these guys to get through the pre-draft process with no injuries. Like no, I remember who was the corner from Washington, Sydney. I can't remember his name now. He was in Philadelphia and Seattle
I
for a
was
little
gonna say
while.
Eagles in Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I was so set. He was Sidney Jones. I thought he
I
was
was
going to
gonna
be
say Sidney Jones,
fantastic.
yeah.
And then he had like a massive injury at his pro day or whatever. I just never fully got back to it. None of that this year. I want none of that this year.
Okay. Fair enough. Now this is the topic that's very close to my heart, so I want everyone to listen up. And I need everyone to know that betting.net finds the best promotions, offers, and bonus codes, so you don't have to. Head over to their website now to take advantage of things like free bets and matching deposits over at betting.net. So, with that in mind, Sam, what is your Twitter handle that everyone can follow?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter where I post at this point almost daily draft profiles. You can find me on Twitter at
Lovely.
Sam_Teets33. That's TEETS33. That also has a link to my free newsletter that you can subscribe to get daily draft profiles delivered right to your inbox every morning at 7 a.m.
Every morning at 7 a.m., this guy, Substack, doing his thing. I am, of course, on Instagram and on Twitter at DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob. Give us a follow, give us a like, retweet our stuff. We will follow back. If you want to hop in the DMs, ask any questions, have a topic for us to talk about on the air, we'll do it. But for now, for Sam Teets, I am Dan Kornhauser. Thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of the NFL Draft Show here on The Grueling Truth, where legends speak.